When I first started doing our family budget, I used a pen and paper. Obviously, that involved a lot of math and calculator work. Well, later on, I progressed to a spreadsheet. And then I started using a really cool budgeting app called Envelopes, where you put all your money into certain envelopes for different categories. I used that for years until they decided to close up shop. Then I thought I found the perfect replacement, and that was Mint software. Then they closed up shop. Every single time I had to transfer my data to another software and set things up all over again. Well, now I use YNAB, which stands for You Need a Budget, and I'm sure hoping they stay in business. It's more complex than some budgeting apps, but you can always try a simpler one. The parallel with time management is that we need a system. We need a way to track our working time. Now, I don't recommend that you track your personal time, unless you have a hobby that it would be useful for some reason, or maybe home renovations. I did that because I felt I was losing too much time to it. And the cold hard facts of the number of hours I was spending on monitoring it or managing it or buying supplies, whatever, that decided for me that I was not going to take on any optional renovations for quite a while until I can work it into my time budget, because it was just stealing too much of my time. It was time tracking that revealed that to me. So remember, time tracking is the secret sauce in a time budget. So we're going to discuss 5 elements of an effective time tracker. What exactly is time tracking? How do you do it? Well, the first element of an effective time tracker is that you have to have a place for task times. Basically, time tracking your work means that you'll have some kind of list that begins with the time you start work and it ends when you finish work. Then each time that you start a new task, you're going to write a brief description of what you did. Just 3 or 4 words. And then you just draw a line down to the time that you finish that task. No need to keep writing it again in every time slot. If it's a 4-hour task, you just write it from the time you began and draw an arrow down to the time you ended. The nice thing about a time tracker is you can keep track of your running total for the week, and that way you can make sure you're not working too few hours or too many hours. You can also use the same data later to add up the time that you spent on specific projects. You can use it as well to audit your time for your month, quarter, or year to see where exactly your time is going, which role, which projects. And you can use your time tracker to budget your time for future weeks, months, quarters, or even years. You can use it to estimate the time that you need for similar projects because you now have that data, how long it took you to do different types of projects. And when you're doing your time tracker, your list of working hours, if you take time for a break or lunch, you just draw a line through that. You don't need to assign a role or anything to that. That's just a break. But the goal here is to account for every single part of your working day, not to let any time just disappear and have you wonder where it went. You want to account for every single time slot in your working day. So that's how you use the element of task times in your time tracker. The second element is time increments. And that just means the size of the time slots in your time tracker. So various planners and agenda books have different time divisions. The general ones might just have a box for the whole day. That might be more like a wall calendar for the week. Other planners will break it into morning, afternoon, and evening. Some more detailed planners will show a timeline from the morning to the evening. It might be divided into hours or half hours for appointments. But personally, I like to use quarter hours, which are blocks of 15 minutes. Now you might think, oh, it's only a few minutes, it's not worth tracking it. But a few minutes is a quarter of an hour. And I like to give the analogy of picking up quarters. If you were walking down a sidewalk and you saw a quarter, would you pick it up? Maybe not. Maybe it's not worth bending over. But if you saw a quarter every few feet as you're walking, would you start picking them up? After a while, you'd have quite a bit of money. Saving little bits of time here and there is like picking up quarters. It really adds up. It is actually worth it. So if you budget an hour for a project and then you finish in 45 minutes, instead of just writing off that 15 minutes, why not put it towards the next project? That can really make a difference throughout a day and especially over a week. So when you're setting up your time tracker, you can decide on the time increments that work best for you, the size of the time slots in your day. Another element of your time tracker is roles. Now, in previous videos, we've talked about the impact of identifying various roles in your work and then color coding them for your tasks, appointments, folders, etc. In your time tracker, it's important to identify what role each task relates to, because you're going to be able to use this information later to see how much time you're spending in each role. And that way you can work at adjusting it until you reach the balance that you want between your roles. But first, you need the information. So in your time tracker, you need a column that shows the time increment and a column that shows a brief description of the task. But you also should add a column that shows which role the task relates to. Now, in order to be complete and effective, the fourth element that you need in your time tracker is a place for totals. You need a place to summarize the work that you did each day. Now, I recommend summarizing it by roles. That means at the end of the day, you're going to write in the total time that you spent in each role. You'll also total the total number of hours that you worked for the day. And that helps you to make sure that you're working a balanced and reasonable amount of time, that you're not becoming a workaholic and you're not becoming lazy. So not too little, but not too much. And there is a way that you can stay on track for your goal of the number of working hours you want to have for the week. You just put a section in your time tracker that says hours left this week. So on the very first day, it's going to be the full number of hours you plan to work that week. So if it's 40, you write in 40. The next day, you're going to subtract the number of hours you worked the day before. So if you worked 8 hours, you subtract that from 40 and you write in 32. That means you have 32 hours left to work for the week. So as you progress throughout your week, you're going to see the number of hours available going down. And if it's not going down quickly enough, it means that you didn't track enough hours that day or you didn't work enough hours that you could track. And so it's a way to kind of keep yourself accountable and to keep yourself motivated, because you know if you don't reach that goal of working hours, you're probably not going to accomplish your projects on time. Now, there's a really cool thing that happens here though. Let's say you get to Friday and you see, oh, I only have 4 hours left to work. So maybe you worked an extra hour or you were able to get something done quicker than you thought. It took less time than you expected. So then you have the option of not working Friday afternoon, and you don't have any pressure or any guilt because you know you accomplished what you had to accomplish that week. So if you get to Friday and you have met your goal by noon, for example, I give you permission to take the rest of the day off as long as you've met your deadlines. And that involves doing some really attentive planning to make sure you're going to finish everything on time. But this is one of the elements of your time tracker that's really important, is totals. And then the fifth element is project tracking. Now, this is something that I've recently added to my own time tracker. I already had the basic elements that we've already talked about, but you can add this other thing that will be really, really helpful to track your projects. So what you want to do is track time that you spent on specific projects. Now, this is really necessary if you bill clients by the hour, for example, or if there's some other reason that you need that data. But even if you don't bill by the hour, let's say you're a freelancer and you charge a project fee. Tracking time for projects is going to help you see how profitable you are. And even if you don't need this information for financial reasons, it's going to show you how productive you are and how much time you need for various types of projects. And that is invaluable for when you're estimating future projects as far as the time that's needed or as far as the fees that you're going to charge. This can help you stop shortchanging yourself or underestimating and then wishing you had quoted more. So basically, it's just an extra column in your time tracker that you're just going to put a check mark in it once you have transferred the number of hours spent on a certain project to the other place where you're keeping track of your total time for specific projects. That might be in a folder, it might be in an app like OneNote, or wherever it is that you're going to keep track, maybe on a different spreadsheet. So you're first writing it in your time tracker as you go through the day. And instead of stopping every single time to go and transfer that to your running total for a certain project, you can just do it at the end of the day. And that's what that column's for. You're just going to check it off. At the end of the day, you'll go through and transfer this information to the project list and check it off. And I think you're going to be really glad that you included this in your time tracker. So we have looked at 5 elements of an effective time tracker. The first is task times. So it just means that you need a way to put in how long you're spending on each task. The second was time increments. That was your decision about whether you're going to use hours, half hours, or quarter hour. The third was roles. So this is a column where you're just going to write in the role that the project or task you're working on relates to. The fourth element was totals. So the total work you did each day, summarized by roles, and then the possibility of having that section for how many hours you have left to work that week. And then finally, the fifth element was project tracking. And so I have a question for you. Do you think that this time tracking method would help you work more efficiently? Feel free to comment below. Do you think this time tracking method will help you work more efficiently? Be sure to get your free time tracker by clicking the link below in the comments, and stay tuned for more videos in this series about time tracking.